Thank you all for being here. Hopefully you can hear me. Hopefully those of you watching on a screen somewhere online can also hear me. Raise your hand if you can't. We'll go with that they can hear us. So welcome. This is the Fall 2019 status update for the Administrative Transformation Program. This is the first of several of these kind of status update sessions that we will be doing as we move through the program. So welcome, those of you in the room here joining me on the Madison campus, and welcome to those watching on a screen somewhere on another campus within our system, or at the Controllers Conference at Parkside. Welcome to you all. So we have a couple of things that we want to get through today. It's mostly a status update, but we do have a period for questions and answers at the end. But first, what I would like to do is introduce our executive sponsors for the Administrative Transformation Program. Vice President for Administration at UW System, Rob Cramer, and Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at UW-Madison, Laurent Heller.
Cool. Can I have this on? Great.
Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning to folks who are here and to everyone who is watching from the Controllers Conference and elsewhere.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming. I assume everyone can hear me. Cool, all right. Yeah, we're so excited to be here today and to have this first sort of town hall-ish event on ATP. You know, as Nick mentions, this is the kind of thing we'll keep doing as the project gets going. You probably all had opportunities to interact with the project before now, but maybe some of you hadn't. Maybe just so I get a sense of the room, at least for those here in person, raise your hand if you have not been to a meeting or heard a presentation about ATP before. Okay, we got one person. A couple more. Okay, so a few of us. This is your first introduction to ATP. We'll talk a little bit about the basics, and move into sort of what it means practically. But we'll have time for questions at the end. So if we go too fast on something, you'll have a chance.
Perfect. So we've been introduced, so maybe go on to the next slide, right? So a reimagining of our administrative infrastructure doesn't grab you right away. I will admit that. But when I think about the discovery visits we've done, the kind of things we've learned about from the different institutions, some of the challenges presented by our current processes that get the basic blocking and tackling done that support our mission.
Yep.
Things like travel, things like purchasing, things like getting speakers paid. It's not as simple as it could be or as it should be. And at the same time, we have lots and lots of bolt-ons and shadow systems that have been put in place over time. One of the things that's contextual for me on this is really important. When I first came to UW System Administration in January of 17, the board had just passed the 2020 Forward framework that prior August. And for me, that was a big step in the right direction as a system, really thinking about how do we intentionally focus on some strategic activities, one of which is operational excellence. Mm-hmm. And the ATP project really plays right into that with respect to, for non-instructional activities, how do we standardize, streamline, and where appropriate, consolidate those to essentially help our institutions meet their missions. And the different stressors on the campuses right now really mean it's vital that we think about how do we do these activities, how do we get our administrative work done in some different ways that help move the mission forward.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I'm only going to disagree with you on one point, actually. I think transforming our administrative enterprise is actually super exciting. And I actually know that all of you agree with me because you just showed up for an hour-and-a-half long program on the Administrative Transformation Program.
Revealed preferences.
We are a special breed of nerd here in this room today together on this subject. I mean, backing up to the really big picture, it is hard to get our work done here, right? It is actually remarkably difficult to do what should be some pretty basic things. That is not because we don't have fantastic people who are busting their humps and working really hard to try and get our mission accomplished, to serve the students, to serve the faculty. It's really that our processes, our policies, our technology, and the way we're organized just makes this much harder than it needs to be. And there's so many different things that, we really need to do a good job, obviously, in support of our students and faculty. There are increasing pressures on us to be able to deliver quicker, faster, more transparently, more efficiently. And with our current infrastructure, it's just going to be too hard to get there. We really do have, I think, with this project, a once-in-a-career opportunity, really, to really rethink how we're going to do this and do it the right way. Do this together in concert with one another, thinking about what the needs in the units really are, the needs at the different campuses really are, and what system needs.
Yeah, I think that's all really important. The piece that I want to make sure as we go through this and talk about it, that we really keep in mind is what you touched on with respect to our policies.
Yeah.
We live in, obviously, a framework that starts with state statute, system administration policy, board of regent policies, down to institutional policies, and then local policies.
Yep.
Some days I think we can't get enough policy. But as we do this,
love
we really need to go through and think about what is the right policy to accomplish what we're trying to do, and what's the least amount of policy possible to accomplish that, and ensure that we're meeting our statutory responsibilities and our responsibilities to the board.
Mm-hmm.
And call into question the way we're doing things. And why is it we're doing this? Is it because this is how we've always done it? Or is there really a good policy piece that drives it? Or have we put policy in place because of a mistake 20 years ago that maybe is no longer needed?
Yeah. So maybe if we go to the next slide. Obviously, one, it's hard to get done what needs to get done, and that could be better, that could be easier for all of us. And there are ramifications of that, whether it's complex process. I think some of the stuff we've learned, I'm not going to get the exact things right, but I think to hire someone at the med school, you currently need to do entry in 9 different systems. You would not write that up that way on a blank sheet of paper. It would be nice if you could data enter once, probably, rather than 9 times. Limited access to data, I think that's a really, really key thing. Having the information we need to make decisions in a timely manner. This is something that a modern system, that a really thought through and intentional system can give us, something this project's going to give us, not something we currently have. I saw updated budget to actual numbers on fiscal year 19 that ended back in June for the first time like a week ago. That is not timely. Our financial statements, hopefully we get in January for the year that ended, in June, 6 months before. This project obviously could bear some real fruit, stuff that'll really help. Next.
Next slide.
Yeah, so maybe this one will seem familiar to you, whichever campus you're on, but we spent a ton of time, the team spent a ton of time gathering real stories, real pain points, understanding the things that really are a challenge. The idea that it took 6 months to pay an international speaker $300 and must complete 5 forms to pay for a $30 lunch. That sounds suboptimal to me. I don't know about all of you, but and for me, I guess I also fall prey to this stuff when I travel for work, which I try not to do very much. But when I do, and submit my travel stuff, I get my stuff rejected constantly too. The other day, the one I had spit back at me was $9 for a parking thing to go to a meeting at the Department of Administration, and I needed to give an itemized agenda of what was discussed and everyone who was at the meeting, in order to get my $9 reimbursement, which I think I chucked and said, actually, forget it. Actually, I'll just pay the $9.
Yeah, so I think one of the key things for me coming out of the discovery visits is getting both kind of the anecdotes that catch your attention, but also the themes. So the team is going through now and trying to pull together what are some of the big themes from those discovery visits that can really then inform both the project work, but also defining up front the goals and the benefits very crisply for this project. One of the pieces I am very excited about is we're developing a benefits matrix that really is going to go through functional area by functional area. How are we going to define success before we start? And then how do we hold ourselves accountable for being successful? And it will be things like improved processing, freeing up time for activities that add value, reducing the number of shadow systems, things we can measure and then report back to the Board of Regents, to the chancellors, to all of you. This is where we were, the new phase, the new steady state. This is where we are in the future.
Yep. So, we think this is the right project at the right time. The sun, stars, and moon have aligned, to sort of open this window for us to get this done right now. And I think we're building the team and hopefully have the approach, and you'll agree, I hope in time, if not already, that will help us really do this the right way. We've done five visits to 6 visits at this point to other universities that have been through these processes. We've taken all the notes on what went well and how they did it. We've also taken, admittedly, a longer list of notes of things that did not go as well and that they would have done differently if they had a chance to do it over again. We've really learned. Higher ed has come a long way, and the people on the project have done this before, have seen this, and I think really doing this with a focus on our users, as well as concrete, tangible benefits that we're really going to receive from this. I think it really shows a lot of promise that this can work. And we can't get there without all of you. Folks in the schools and colleges, on the campus, in system offices, you are the folks who know what's going on and know what we need, and you'll be an important part of how we move this thing forward. Yeah, so what do we hope to achieve, right? As Rob mentioned, we're working on a very detailed view of that, which we'll be talking a lot about on campus, things we can measure and whatnot. But big picture, where are we going? One, we need to return time to actual mission-related activities. The amount of time we spend, doing basic administrative stuff really could be reduced a lot. Technology's come a long way. Our business processes could be streamlined. There's a huge opportunity there, and that's valuable. That's valuable to the mission if we can return faculty's time, if we can return administrators' time. Another thing, the pace of change, I'm sure you've noticed this in your job, it's not slowing down. It's actually speeding up. We're all like, geez, I just got over that last change. It's too much change. I don't really want any more change. And now there's still more change coming at me even more quickly. So through this project, we really hope to build an organization and a system, that's adaptable to that and that understands we are going to be in a world of continuous improvement going forward. And that really creates fascinating opportunities, I think, for all of us from a career perspective and, for our mission. So that'll be good. And, financial controls, internal controls are important, could be better. Information security, very important to all of us, increasingly so. And data. Data is so valuable to us as administrators, each of us, in making sure we're doing the right things, that we're doing them timely, making the best decisions we can for our university. So, anything you would add?
No, I think I just... example in that last one, I had a conversation with the project about a person who's a healthy skeptic. And she commented about the number of different places she has to go right now to get information to make a basic decision.
Yeah.
And my point was, if we're successful, you will have one place to go to get that, and you will trust the data you see. You won't question, is this accurate? Is it up to date? When was it refreshed?
It is true.
So those would be kind of the, I think, telling points as we go through this.
Yeah.
And really thinking about how do we bake in at every level intentional design thinking and keeping the user experience in mind. That's critical.
Yeah.
We have to think about how do we have processes that are reasonable, that are efficient, but then also the user experience. And it shouldn't feel different if you're in different places within this future ATP.
Yeah. I mean, and the current system built up the way it did with a whole lot of people making logical decisions with what they had and, what was in front of us. And given the way our central systems worked, we needed to find new ways to do stuff ourselves in the schools and colleges, on the campuses, to move things forward. And this is this rare opportunity we have to take a look at all that and what it really did, sort of what it intended to do, and then what it accidentally did also when we let it grow up that way, and rethink it. So I don't know what the correct number of billing systems is for a campus to have. Is it 1? Maybe. Is it 2? Maybe. Is it 38 separate billing systems that we run just on the UW-Madison campus alone? Pretty clearly not. And if you want timely billing information or to understand where your bill came from, go ask 38 different systems for the answer for that. Make sure you know all the individuals to call, in order to figure that out. And good luck. We can do better. So, do we have any more slides, or we pass it on to you? Cool. All right.
Are we talking about this one?
Oh,
We can talk about this one.
sure.
So I think the piece I really want folks to think about for today is, and it relates to your point about change, the context for this project. There's a lot of other things that are going on that we have to keep in mind, we have to coordinate, and we need to be really intentional about. So UW System is standing up the shared services program coming out of the restructuring that's really aligned nicely with 2020 Forward and Core. That group is working through 17 high priority service areas for support of the comprehensive institutions. I think Madison and Milwaukee are interested in a couple of those. As we go forward with ATP, we need to think about that future state. How do we incorporate that activity? How do we incorporate what Milwaukee's already been doing with respect to their service delivery model? And what are the things Madison wants to think about with respect to its service? Title and total compensation study is also hitting some pretty critical months right now. That ties into some of the things we're doing. The procurement automation, P2P, we just briefed the Board of Regents on that last week. One of the discussions, frankly, was, do we have a separate procurement automation project, or is that part of ATP? Mm-hmm. We felt like the benefits of that are sufficient enough, important enough to move that forward a little bit faster. But at the same time, we need to be thinking about the common elements of that, because a lot of the individuals involved in this project also get touched by that project. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want to touch on the 2 Madison items up there.
Oh, yeah, a few other things going on, as you know. Do It is well underway in this interoperability project, which really lays some really fundamental groundwork to let systems talk to one another around campus. That'll be among other things. So that's a biggie. And the analytics roadmap, Kathy Lloyd, our chief data officer, is sitting here, and we're thinking through sort of what's campus's BI, business intelligence, and reporting strategy. That's really complementary and related to this. Obviously, reporting and data that we need is bigger than just finance and HR and research data. We want student data and facilities data and all manner of things to help answer questions. So we're working on that and advancing that program. You'll be hearing more about that in the coming months. So the components of the project, big picture, I think it's easy to get sucked into thinking of this as a tech project. It is not a tech project. It is about people. This project starts with people, and we will work together with all of you to make this work. But people, process, technology, policy, technology somewhere in there too. But so big components we have been working on. A chart of accounts rethink. If you're a finance dweeb like me, you know how exciting and or challenging it is to rethink the chart of accounts. But think of that as like the DNA of our finances. And if you can't get a report that tells you what you want to know, that's probably because your chart of accounts and your accounting isn't set up to answer the financial questions that you have. So this is a big opportunity for us and will be really cool. And the team's been doing some good early thinking on that. Policy, business processes will, of course, be a huge component of this. How do we streamline our business processes? How many variations do we really need in a business process? We probably don't need 38 different ways to bill a customer, and if maybe 2 would work, maybe that's what we should do. So that kind of thing.
Yeah, on that topic, I think the business process work, that'll be some of the hardest work, particularly initially, as we really think about what does it mean to think through all the steps in the business process. Why do we have these steps, and how do we get more standardization across units, across institutions? At the last Chancellor briefing, we were walking through this. One of the chancellors mentioned 9 signatures on one of their forms.
Yeah.
7 of which are really to communicate something's going on versus actually to approve it. And his closing comment was, as you look at business processes, be brutal. Be brutal. And so that was like, okay, there's somebody who's going to support where we want to go and where we need to go. But it's going to be really hard.
True.
Because there's a lot of ownership around processes and the variations.
Well, and a lot of that was us doing it to ourselves. No, I do not believe state law requires someone at Eau Claire to have 9 signatures in order to transact basic business. That's not actually a requirement. We can change that. We're going to change that. So.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll hang around for questions.
So the early work that we have been doing so far, and I apologize, I don't think I introduced myself earlier. I'm Nick Tincher. I'm the program director for the Administrative Transformation Program. My counterpart, Steve Kish, who's the program executive, is attending the Controllers Conference today, so he is there with them. So some of the early work that we have been really focusing on with the program first is how do we organize ourselves? How do we build a team that can actually tackle what we're trying to do? So what we started out by doing is developing a vision, a mission, and a set of guiding principles. And I think the really interesting thing here is the guiding principles that we have developed. So we are intentionally starting with people as a guiding principle. This is a together project. This is a we project. We're doing all of this together. None of this is happening to you. This is all happening together with all of us as a UW system and campus communities. As Lauren talked about, we want to enable access to data. And as Rob mentioned, we want to have a single place where people can go and they know that the data that they're looking for is accurate and correct and updated. Simplify and streamline rigorously. This was one that we had just touched on. Be brutal about how we're looking at standardizing, streamlining business processes, making things a lot more simple, which leads to the next point, which is just enough complexity. So we don't want to say that we're going to simplify everything because UW System is a complex place. UW-Madison is a complex place. So to say we're going to simplify everything is really an oversimplification of that statement. So we know that we're going to need some level of complexity, but we don't really need 9 different signatures on an approval form kind of complexity. So we need to be asking ourselves as we do this work, what is the right level of complexity to make sure that we're accomplishing what we need to accomplish? We want to design and build for the future. So as we move through this, one of the things that we're recognizing is that we're doing this partly for us today, but we're also doing this for the future of the institution. We need to be mindful of that. There's a reason that these are often called once-in-a-generation projects because we need to be thinking about the next 25, 30, 40 years of the institution's life and really be designing and building towards that. And we want to make the right decisions in the right way. So a little bit later I'll talk about decision-making framework that we have proposed and put together for the program that will be the way that we deal with decisions in the program. So this is the current state organization structure. You don't need to study it. I'm not going to quiz you on it later. But what I do want to point out is sort of 3 areas of the organization chart. So starting at the top, you heard from Rob and Lauren. Now you're hearing from me. And the program really is put together in 3 different buckets. So the left side, we're calling our functional strategy area. And I'll explain more what all of this is in a minute. So our functional strategy leads are Kurt McMillan from UW-Madison RSP. For HR strategy, it's Patrick Sheehan from UW-Madison OHR. Our finance strategy lead is Susie Maloney from UW-Madison Business Services, who's at the Controllers Conference today. And we are doing a lot of work in really figuring out how we're going to think about what the functional parts of this program are and how we're going to go through it. So a little bit more on that in a moment. The second kind of category of the organization chart is the change strategy. One of the things that we've learned from past projects that we've embarked on is that change strategy is not something that is often at the forefront. It's not something we think about first. And with the Administrative Transformation Program, that's something we're changing. We're doing that differently. We're putting change strategy as really a focal point and a pillar. And the reason for that is because this is a we project. We need to do this together. And we can't do that if we don't have proper ways of communicating and engaging and helping people with the jobs that they need to be doing. And on the right side is what we're currently calling program enablement. So this is areas of professional services that are going to serve the entirety of the program. So project managers, business analysts, cybersecurity analysts, policy analysts, folks that have steep and rich experience in doing those areas of expertise, of providing their knowledge in a cohesive and consistent way across the functional parts of the program and the change strategy areas as we're engaging with our communities. So the functional teams, you saw the little bubbles on the bottom left side. What we mean by a core team is really sort of an overall leadership team for each functional area. What they will be doing is synthesizing and recommending work that comes from design and validation teams that are working within the program. They're going to be tasked with ensuring that all of the functional work that's happening is in alignment. And core teams are going to be persistent throughout our program. And what I mean by that is we're currently in a pre-planning phase. We will eventually move to a planning phase, and then we will move to an implementation. We envision the core teams serving the entirety of the program across the entire duration, whereas design and validation teams are really going to be organized around work that has to happen. So design teams, they really serve as the doers. They're the people that have the subject matter expertise in accounts receivable, in recruiting, and thinking about how we're going to be doing that better in the future, how we're going to be doing that differently, and really paying attention to what are the things that are working well right now that we want to make sure to bring into our future state also. Validation teams are ensuring that the work that the design teams are doing is going to work wholesale and across the entirety of our institution. So what we want is a system kind of checks and balances where there's a design team that's doing some work and there's another team looking at it saying, yes, this is going to work, or no, have you considered this? We really want that second pair of eyes really thinking about the work that's happening. So we don't want silos within the functional areas either. So we imagine the core teams not being working in silos. There's a core team for HR, there's a core team for finance, there's a core team for research administration, for example. We know that how we're going to approach this is really a matrix kind of a model, where finance and HR are working together, and also research administration touches both of those areas, as well as standing on its own. We also have reporting and data strategy and information technology strategy that will be working across all of those functional areas in a matrix sort of approach. So a bit on change strategy. The objectives that we have for the change strategy within the program, as I mentioned, this is a highlight of the Administrative Transformation Program. It's a we program. We cannot do this without each other. The overall objective is to inspire excitement about what we're trying to do with the Administrative Transformation Program. We're providing opportunities for involvement and ownership. And one of the things that we're going to be doing differently than than what might feel from past project is we're actually prioritizing in-person engagements with people. So I'm really happy to see all of your faces in person here today. And as we move through the program, we're going to be coming to your areas to visit you, to talk with you, to engage with you, to really think about how we're proceeding with the program, the work that we're doing, and is it really working for you? We, as part of our communications, are developing consistent content and using language that resonates with all of us as a UW community. We want to, as well as the program, design and build for the future. So as we think about a change strategy, what are some things, what are some innovative ways that we can be engaging with our communities that are new and exciting and ways in which people like to work together. And another objective of the change strategy is to provide a toolkit. So we want to provide a toolkit for various communities to be able to readily understand all of the work that's happening within the program and be able to tailor it to various audiences wherever they might be within the institution. So the components really are communications, engagement, and learning and development. And the communications pillar of the change strategy are things that are tried and true methods of communicating. So we do have a website. We will have email notifications. We will have newsletters, those kinds of basic things. But one of the things that we know from what we've done in the past is that only goes so far, which is where the in-person engagements really come in. And that is the engagement pillar of the change strategy. So within the engagement pillar, we're looking for ways to be able to engage with stakeholder groups across the entire institution, that we can have meaningful relationships and develop long-term trust and ability to kind of work on this together. The learning and development pillar talks about how we think about the work that we're doing and the work that we need to do and be able to prepare our campuses, communities for being able to do that work. So thinking about what needs to change in terms of processes, policies, systems, and really having a place within the program to help develop competency models for thinking about how we're going to be working in the future, thinking about how we're going to be training on new software, on additional processes that we might be having. So all of that, we're taking ownership of that within the program as part of the learning and development pillar of the change strategy. The Ambassador Program is a part of the signature of our change strategy, and it lives within the engagement pillar of the change strategy. So the Ambassador Program is really that concerted face-to-face mechanism for us to be able to engage at all levels of every campus to really understand what is happening in their areas, for them to provide feedback into the program, and for them to have a chance to really be advocates for what we're trying to do. So as they have questions about things that are happening within the program, the Ambassador Network is really a place for people to come together to talk about, well, this is happening in my area. Are you seeing the same thing in your area? And really have a chance to network in that way, but also have a direct line into the program to help us and provide feedback as we're thinking about the work that we're doing within the program. So that's a bit about how we're organizing ourselves as a team. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we have been doing in pre-planning. One of the things that I want to mention is that there's a lot of work that has already happened. There's a lot of work to do. And so we just want to sort of level set and ask for your patience as we continue doing this. We don't know everything at this point. We're still very much in pre-planning. We're still very much thinking about what is the right thing, what is the right sequence for doing the right thing. So we just want to be sure to ask for your patience as we start moving through the remainder of the pre-planning work over the next 6 months or so. So I said a little bit ago that we have put together a decision-making framework for the program that is described here. So we have the RIDE framework, which is recommend, input, decide, and execute. This model, this framework for decision-making is fairly flexible in terms of how we might want to use this. So as we think about things like a scope change for the program overall, the RIDE framework can help us with that decision-making. As we think about putting budgets and financial impacts together for the program, the RIDE framework will help us really get to decisions about how that works. As we think about changing business processes, the RIDE framework will help us to walk through those conversations and make those kinds of decisions that we need to make. Another piece of work that Lauren referenced earlier, the chart of accounts. So a team has been working on a chart of accounts prototype. This was a fascinating piece of work. The team that came together started with a set of guiding principles about what the chart needs to do for us in the future. What does the current state chart, what are the deficiencies in the current state chart? And how do we need to make that better moving forward? So the team really started with a set of guiding principles about what and how they were going to think about doing their work. They then inspected a lot of different cases in which the chart would be used for processing, for management reporting, and in general financial reporting. What are the elements of the chart that we really need to consider as we start thinking about those kinds of reporting needs? They mapped out all kinds of data elements, and then they used some scenarios. They have a list of about 35 or 40 different scenarios that they've used to really test the chart prototype that has been developed. So that work is really exciting so far. Where it is right now is the prototype has been developed. The prototype has been, is in the process of being vetted across the entire system. And we look forward to future work on that in the next couple of months. So Rob had talked about the discovery visits a little while ago. This was an effort that was done at UW-Madison as well as at UW System, starting really last winter and going through about July or August of this year. There was a series of conversations that happened, 250 interviews, or 250 participants across 125 interviews at UW-Madison, which allowed us to get to things like what are the distinct business needs that we have? What are exception process maps across the institution? So as we think about exception processes, we talk about billing, and clinical billing as being one kind of billing, but also there's a child care center on the Madison campus that also bills for services. So how do we really think about billing in that context, and what are the differences in the way that the processes need to happen? So there was 50 examples of that happening. Many of you have probably heard about the inventory of shadow and bolt-on systems that we have. This was made more robust through the discovery visits. We found a few more, or closer to 400 now. There's 105 different data and reporting requirements that were expressed through the discovery visits on the Madison campus. Across the system, there were 365 participants across the system that did the same kinds of interactions. 125 different interviews across every campus within the system. There were really 4 major themes that were summarized overarching the needs across the entire system. And as no surprise, those come back to business processes, reporting needs, technology, and policy. So a little bit about the technology procurement. As we've been talking about this not being a technology project, one of the things that we know to be true is that we can't actually move forward all the way with thinking about how we're going to do business processes without taking into consideration what is the technology that's going to support us doing our work. So we have been talking about how we're going to move through a selection process for a new cloud-based ERP, enterprise resource planning software that will replace HRS and SFS over a period of the next several years. That work revealed that we have a contracting vehicle that we can use to procure the software, which means that we're not actually doing an RFP process as we would traditionally imagine. We have the ability to use a contracting vehicle. With that, though, we want to make sure that we're looking at different options for software in a thoughtful way, and we really want to be testing how those vendors are going to be working for us, both with their software and with the kind of relationship that we're going to be able to have with them as the University of Wisconsin. So a bit about the technology procurement, the software procurement itself. We will be engaging with the vendors and providing them information about what we're trying to do. So in a typical scenario, if we were to go out and say, "Dear vendors, we want to use your software. Please tell us why you're the best," that doesn't actually give them a lot of information to help us with how we're going to be evaluating them. So what the team has done is we've spent a great deal of time really thinking about that. What are ways that we can engage with the vendors to make sure that they're answering all the questions that we have so that we can make the best choice possible for how to move forward with the technology procurement for us. So there's basically three different kinds of deliverables that we're using to help with that. One is the benefits realization that we talked about briefly a bit ago. A second piece of information that kind of feeds into that process is a business capability model, which is really a visual way of telling what are the processes that we need to be doing as part of this program, and what is the scope of the program. So as we think about managing finance, managing cash management, for example, that is one example of something that is a business capability that we need to be putting into information for the vendors to help us with. The third piece of that is scenarios. So we have developed about 30, 40, more? 130? Great. No, that's actually awesome. We've developed about 130 different scenarios that we want to go to the vendors and say to them, here's a practical scenario at the University of Wisconsin. We want you to answer for us how your software is going to help us with this scenario. So these are things that are very specific to the University of Wisconsin. So for example, our relationship with employee trust funds and the Wisconsin retirement system. That is not a feature that every state has. That's not a feature that every business has. That's something that's very particular to the University of Wisconsin. And we really need to look at the vendors to provide us with how their software is going to help us with that kind of interaction. So those three things are the business capability model, the benefits realization plan, and the scenarios are all pieces of how we're going to be interacting with the software vendors and how we're going to proceed with conversations with them to evaluate the software that they have. So the work of the software selection and the demos is really preparing for that has been work that we've been doing. And as we move forward, we're thinking about starting vendor demonstrations for software in January. So that will be an opportunity for everyone across all of our campuses to really participate in those demonstration sections and to participate in deep dive sections and make sure that all of the questions are answered. There is a software selection evaluation team of approximately 15 people that has representation across the system and across different employee categories. So we have HR represented, we have finance represented, we have research represented. We also have faculty representation and technology and reporting and data represented on that group. So that software evaluation team will be gathering input. They will be evaluating the vendors on their own accord, but they will also be looking at input that they're receiving from our campus communities and our partners across the system for their input as they work to make a final recommendation report, which will go to our executive sponsors for their choice in the software selection. So that is work that's happening in the fall and into next spring. The other thing that will be happening very soon, starting this winter and going through next summer, is a system implementation partner. And really this is probably a larger decision to make than the software that we use, is how that software is configured to be able to help us with our processes, with our policies, and with the work that we need to do. So this is a process that is likely to follow a traditional RFP. So we're beginning the work of thinking about how do we put together an RFP that illustrates what we're trying to accomplish within the program, an indication of what software we're targeting using, but then also making sure to solicit their input and their feedback as to how they're going to be helping us configure and implement that software once we get to that part of the program. So this is a bit more about our benefits realization plan. Sometimes we call this benefits metrics and accountability. Really what it is a way for us to catalog the intended benefits of what we're trying to achieve through the administrative transformation program. So it is one thing to evaluate a project as on time and on budget, but it's actually not sufficient enough to indicate that we've been successful in what we're trying to do. So benefits, metrics, and accountability is our way of being able to evaluate our success on many different dimensions across the program. So we think about benefits being aligned with the 2020 Forward plan, CORE, all of the campus's strategic plans, and UW Shared Services initiatives. An example of benefits that are categorized into 4 different areas are establishing greater efficiencies, improving services and infrastructure, fully enabling decision-making, and reducing risk. So an example of a benefit might be streamlined travel and expense reimbursement. That might be a broad category of a benefit that we might want to realize. Within that, we get very specific about what we mean by that. So time of entry for a reimbursement request, the time that it takes for the reimbursement to be processed, the amount of errors that we want to see in the reimbursement process, the amount of kickbacks that we have. There's a lot of different things that we can use to consider how we're actually improving travel and expense. But that is an example of one benefit category that we might see in the plan. So as we list out the benefits, we then assign metrics to them. How are we going to evaluate what the target is? Did we hit it? Did we miss it? What can we do better as we continue moving forward? The other thing that we assign to it is accountability. So how is this benefit going to be serving us in the program as we move forward? It's going to be serving as a guidepost to help the work of the design and validation teams have targets of what we want to be able to hit. So some next steps for us. As I mentioned, the chart of accounts prototype validation is ongoing, likely will be ongoing for the next several months. We have started the benefits, metrics, and accountability plan. We will look to kind of finalize that before we really get into the software procurement. so that we can have a really good idea as we're doing those software vendor demonstrations. What are we really looking for from a vendor software to help us accomplish? The software procurement and vendor demos themselves, as I mentioned, likely kicking off in January. We're also assembling a business case. So we have had approval from the Board of Regents to engage in pre-planning activity, and that's what we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of pre-planning activity. What we need to do is take what we've learned in pre-planning, all of the things that we know that we're going to need to do in an implementation phase, and put that together into a business case and come back to the Board of Regents and explain what we're trying to do. And ongoing campus engagements. So this has been, we have been engaging with various stakeholder and community groups across the campuses. Those will be ongoing as we continue moving forward with pre-planning. I'm not going to read everything up here, but this just sort of gives you an indication about the road to transformation. So as I mentioned, we're still very much in pre-planning, and we're likely to be in pre-planning through June of 2020. So that comes back to my point about asking for your patience as we continue to kind of work through a lot of the things that we're thinking about. We don't yet have all the answers. We won't until June 2020. And at that time, I might tell you, yeah, we know a lot more than we thought, or yeah, we still don't know everything. So then after we kind of move out of pre-planning, we'll go into a series of planning exercises. So taking the information that we've learned in pre-planning, all of the work that we've done, how do we want to think about it and organize it as we move forward to actually implementing it, starting roughly a year from right now. So lastly, we need your help. We're pleading for your help all the time. One way that you can help us is to just advocate for the program goals. So as Rob and Laurent indicated earlier, the goals of the program: give time back to the missions, be able to appropriately respond and be resilient to the increasing pace of change that we have, and to safeguard the UW brand through things like providing accurate data that's available to our campus communities, financial controls, information security. And the second thing that we really want your help with is to engage with us. So recognize that the team is growing rapidly. Recognize that there's a lot of work to be done in design teams and validation teams, and beyond that, and beyond pre-planning. Recognize that we're in pre-planning until next summer, so the opportunities to really engage with us are only going to get bigger from here, which is a really cool thing. So with that, that is the updates that I wanted to share today. And what I wanted to do is move to a period of questions and answers. So for those of you who have registered and are watching on a screen, you have instructions about how to submit questions. And hopefully you've taken an opportunity to do that through the presentation this morning. But we also want to take questions from those of you who are attending in the room here as well. So I'll open it up at this point.
Well, and I just want to say thanks for the presentation, Nick. I thought that was great. I think you see some of why we're excited about the team we've got and how stuff's coming together. Obviously all this stuff is a work in progress. We are in pre-planning. We've got some dates on there. We don't want to get pinned down to a very specific date right now. We don't want to get pinned down to a very specific budget number right now, because it's so important that we do this right and that it really works, rather than that it happens right away. Right is more important than that. That said, we do need to move fast, because things could be better. They could be better sooner, which would be great. So, yeah. Open it up.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit more about how this will interact? There's the one slide about the other big projects outside of ATP, like the interoperability, how that interaction will go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the question was, got to make sure that my mic is turned on so I'm watching it here. The question that was asked was, can we explain a little bit more about how the projects that are related to ATP are actually going to fold into the work that we're doing in ATP? Like, summarize that. So we have a strategy within the program around related projects. So we are inviting the related projects and the leadership of those projects into meetings right now with us so that we can have those conversations about how do we think about how your timeline interacts with the timeline of ATP. What are the overall deliverables and the goals of your project? What are the overall deliverables and goals of ATP? And really kind of taking that together. It's going to have to be in an ad hoc basis on per project. We're not going to be able to come up with a framework that's going to work in every case. But we are actively engaging with all of the related projects right now to talk about exactly that thing. How are we going to pay attention to the work you're doing and the work that's moving forward?
I would just add on that, I think the change management framework for ATP is really solid. And as we go forward, how do we leverage that and replicate that? So in the other projects, people see similar change management, and particularly thinking about the P2P project. Really get those three parts and replicate that and do it for the P2P so that it feels the same for folks. Even though they're different projects, some of those things are going to really overlap and they need to be integrated very tightly.
Yeah, I would just add a teeny bit on that. My hope is that these related projects, will feel similar. They're all an opportunity to prove that we know what we're doing and that we're going to be able to pull this all off, and we'll show you along the way that that's what we can do. Another thing both System and Madison have been working on, we recently stood up a sort of project portfolio management office in the Office of Strategic Consulting to try and bring some norming and coherence and consistency to project management, the technical aspects of project management. Who does what when? What's the critical path on the schedule? Have we actually got a change management plan, and does it meet the sort of needs we have for these projects? So that there's a consistent approach to that. And the great thing about the portfolio office is that all these different projects report into one place, and the overall project plan for the campus and System has a similar office now can be integrated into one spot, and we can see, TTC is going live with this on the same day that ATP was thinking about doing this other thing, and we can see around some corners and see where these things come together. So I think that approach has a lot of promise to help. It's going to be complicated, but we're trying to set it up so it'll go well.
I'll bring the microphone over so that we can make sure folks tuning in remotely can hear you.
We know that this program is going to be affecting almost everybody on campus, basically, and we all have an obligation, as you said earlier, to kind of sell the program and be positive about it and make those that work with us understand that this is something that's happening, that it will make that will be an important change for them. Is there any guidance for providing that type of at this point that type of information to people, and then maybe I would assume that some will even have feedback at that point. Is there a way to provide their ad hoc feedback back to the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that the most prominent way right now is to engage via the website. So the website has a way for people to kind of sign up to engage with the program. It also has a mechanism to provide feedback or thoughts that folks have as they're thinking about the program. And I imagine exactly the thing that you're talking about is something that will become more mature as we begin moving through this. I see the Ambassador Program playing a huge role in being able to make sure that everyone on every campus has some ability to talk about the transformation program at some level and advocate for it and know how to provide feedback and input back to us.
I think we have the first of the Madison campus ambassador program meetings coming up. Kayla there is our chief ambassador for the project. When is that meeting, Kayla?
October 30th.
October 30th. There you go. Coming up soon.
The other piece of it I think is important, we're asking you to advocate. But I think it's also that it's important that you hold us accountable for what we say we're going to do, and if things aren't playing out the way we've indicated, speak up and say, hey, wait a minute, you said X, what's going on here? Because it's got to be decisions getting pushed down to the right level and accountability also at all levels.
Sorry, hard to get to. So my question is going to focus specifically on some policy issues that interact with this, but it's part question and part kind of prompt or push. We talk about transforming things and we talk about policies that get in our way. And I don't think we need to wait for this project to be finished to start that work, but I don't see it happening. So when I interact with people who do policy, and Rob, I'm going to put you on the spot here on this one, they come and they ask, well, what new policies do you need? And I always say, what policies can we get rid of? But that's not their focus. And so if what you're saying is we need to get stuff out of the way, how come that isn't happening yet? And I mean, it's not really a challenge, but it's like, can we get that work started now? And if so, how?
So great question. I don't have a list with me, but we actually have gotten rid of several policies. They typically don't get as much play, I guess, because they go away quietly, and maybe that's a mistake because people will still think the policy's in place. So how do we announce when a policy goes away, right? Celebrating wins there. I think the other piece of it is holding us accountable, right? So as we're talking through the policy stuff, how are the people who are driving policy getting engaged in this and being challenged in the same way, right? How do we look at our policies through some different lenses to make sure we're thinking about that very carefully? Travel's come up a couple times, and that's an area that Lauren and I have flagged as a place to really think about stuff. I think there's some other quick wins in the policy space. Part of the question we have to ask ourselves is, where is the policy at? And we have this interesting accretion of policy going from state statute. The board then puts in place a policy maybe to effectuate the state statute. System administration puts in place a policy to detail the board's policy to detail the state statute. An institution then maybe wants to put a policy in place. A college, a department, a unit feels the need to have a policy. We probably shouldn't do that every time. And so how do we get more intentional about really thinking what's the right level for the policy and where do we need it to reside?
Yeah, we also have been looking at spots where we could have a quick win, maybe, on some of these things. The procure to pay project, for example, is one that'll be in that category. There may be some policy changes that don't require a whole bunch of other process, people, technology transformation that we could just do. I do think the team's working on a work stream around how to set that up. But like many things, we're juggling a lot of balls and building the team, so we're not fully there yet. But to be continued for sure.
We received a message that the lighting is a little dark in the video feed, so if the sponsors could move over into the light a little bit more, so folks tuning in remotely can see you better.
We can do that. All right.
Great question.
You mentioned before on the policies, and it seems like we're really just either into get rid of the policy or keep it. But is there really an analysis on every policy and going, what are the unintended consequences of it, and what's the administrative burden on the policy versus what's gained? I haven't seen anything out there like that. Even on recent policies, it's created a lot of issues that I don't think people are necessarily aware of.
I do think that a really large, significant investment like this project, where we're really thinking through all the business processes and configuration we have to do to accommodate some of the policy irregularities and everything, will give us a really big lever to try and move the organization on this stuff. Because I think this project will give us an opportunity to say, this policy that we have right now will cost us $5 million a year, to implement, because we've studied the business process, we've studied the tech accommodation that has to happen around it, and is it really worth that? I do think this will give us a good opportunity to sort of make some of those arguments. The other plug I'd put in is I know System's done a ton of work around just inventorying, cataloging, and updating business process. And our Office of Strategic Consulting has been undertaking a similar project just to figure out what are all the policies on the Madison campus and try and get them all into one place where we can see them. We never had that before. And how policy gets adopted is not necessarily always clear. At times I've maintained, yes, policy gets created because I say so. In the long run, that's probably not the right way for the organization to run. We need a more organized process in that. So it's an area that we need to do a lot more work in.
I'm just curious. Oh, sorry. I'll stop yelling. I'm just curious if at this point, and I know it's still early, you're anticipating that research administration, HR, and finance will all implement at the same time.
Yeah, that's our expectation at this point. Yeah, they're so intertwined. It seems like the kind of thing that ideally you would go live with at the same time. There's always some possibility that wouldn't be the case, but
Yeah, I would add, the structure of the phasing right now is UW-Madison system administration first. And so within that context, I think we're thinking about what you described, the pieces go live at the same time. We're still kind of talking through then what's the right phasing for other institutions coming out of that. And how do we engage the other institutions in planning that first part so that we can leverage that work out and not have a bunch of rework to do.
do we have any online questions maybe? No?
No, haven't gotten any yet.
We just answered all the questions out there. Controllers with no questions. I love that. Yeah, Jenny.
Hi, this maybe is for Nick about accountability and metrics. Do we have any baseline data on something like, we talk about waiting 6 weeks for a check to be cut, but is there any kind of systematic data on that kind of thing that we can later say we're doing better at?
There's not a lot of baseline data that we can look at now other than anecdotal. But one of the things as we're building out the benefits metrics and accountability is asking ourselves, what is a good baseline to hit? And can we start evaluating against that baseline right now so that as we're moving through, we can kind of take a better look at it.
Yeah, and that's not to say that there aren't metrics now. There are obviously, but they're rarely comprehensive or like institutionally adopted across everyone. So I've got huge piles of metrics, but which ones do we believe in? Are they really quite the right ones? This project will, I think, help us get our arms around that a little better.
I think definition of the metrics too, definition of the data elements is something that right now, as we think about it, it's wildly inconsistent. So that putting this together is an opportunity for us to really define what the metrics mean and how we're going to mechanically think about evaluating them.
Okay. Any last questions? We got one in the back.
Yeah, you said earlier that some policy has disappeared and it hasn't gotten much attention because it's gone quietly. Would it be possible if that happens in the future to send out an email about it? Because when text disappears off the website, it leaves a question, does that still exist? Was someone negligent in updating the website? And it often still exists in other secondary locations, like the knowledge base or a department's own website. So a simple email might really help clarify that.
Yeah, I think that's a good admonition, is that when we do eliminate policy, communicate that out, probably through the same channels that new policy comes through, so it's consistent. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so this is going to be an interesting journey. I'm really glad you're all here with us. We really look forward to working with you. Until soon, you will be hearing more.
Thanks very much. Enjoy your day.